Are you ready to get serious?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, Kori, we need to talk about stress eating and emotional eating.
Okay.
A topic I certainly have tons of clients bring up to me literally every day. So what I think, first of all, is there's quite a misunderstanding of even how to define that. And I know a lot of our audience would love to hear a little bit of a deeper dive into this instead of our typical podcast format. I want to really spend some time getting into this.
Yeah.
So I wrote down some questions, if you don't mind.
Awesome.
Okay?
Yes.
One of the things I think would be helpful is for people to understand what type of behaviors truly are stress-based or emotion-based, because I can just be hungry or kind of self-sabotage my goal a little bit by eating some extra food. But what would you say are true markers of stress or emotional eating?
True markers of stress and emotional eating, and what I've seen from the clients that I've worked with on this, Joe, is there's a strong level of avoidance of emotion. So these individuals really struggle with the experience of feeling, and particularly when it comes to what they would label as unpleasant emotions. So anxiety, you mentioned stress, discouragement, a sense of shame. Those sorts of emotions cause them to feel uncomfortable, and it's very natural for all of us, whether we struggle with emotional eating or not, to want to change that, to want to feel better. But for the individuals who move toward eating, I mean, the behavior that we see is a movement towards what is called a compensatory behavior. Super fancy term for, you know, something that is going to shift the experience for them. And for a lot of food works. Food works in situations like that, where we feel this sense of threat or unpleasantness or discomfort. But it doesn't, it's not an effective behavior in the long term, because what ends up happening is the emotion is still there. It's under the surface. And so until we learn to acknowledge that it's there and learn to accept it and be with it, and that's not me saying don't try to feel better, but it really becomes more about learning how to be a better feeler. Am I answering your question?
Yeah, so I'm thinking in terms of, and yes, I mean, that's a great preview of what I think we need to dig into. But so I know in my personal background, if I were engaging what I would call stress eating, it could be something as simple as feeling frantic at work. And so it's Monday morning, I've got 40 hours of work to do in a 12-hour window, and almost instantly I feel hungry. I feel like I need to get some food. Even though it's totally counterproductive to what I'm trying to do, which is work, I think, oh my gosh, I just instantly feel like eating.
So what I have seen is that emotional or stress eating operates on a continuum. You have individuals who engage in just full-on binges, where they're so uncomfortable and they want to feel something different very quickly that they will drive to different fast food places and just eat as they're going to the next one. And then on the opposite end of the continuum, like you have mentioned, just feeling a level of kind of hyperactivity, a bit of activation, and you just kind of feel like you're walking on eggshells and you don't feel real stable, where you'll, like, I work from home. I find when I'm experiencing something like that, I'm in the kitchen a lot. I'm walking back and forth to the kitchen and just kind of picking at things. Completely unnecessary. I'm not hungry. You know, I've had full meals. But then, you know, in the middle of the continuum, then there are the individuals who might come home from work after a long day where they've been concentrating and really focusing. They're tired, and They may not even be particularly hungry, but they sit down and just eat more than they know they need, or they'll eat as they're cooking dinner, and then they'll eat dinner, and then they'll sit down after dinner and, you know, eat that bag of chips or the whole bowl of popcorn or something like that. And, you know, they say to me, and I'm sure you've heard this too, like, I just want to relax. I just want to feel relaxed.
So are there categories, as a psychologist, do you label these as one emotion at a time? Like, oh, you're emotional eating out of sadness, or you out of anxiety, or you out of anger? Or how do you, as a therapist, decide how do I even attack this with this client?
Well, it's going to vary from person to person. I think it's important to recognize that, I mean, you and I are talking about the unpleasant emotions, the ones that people would label as bad or that they want to get away from. Emotional eating occurs with positive feelings too. We tend to use food to either extend the positive ones, like in times of celebration or holiday eating. You know, we're not eating because we're sad normally in cases like that. Or we're trying to get away from or extract the discomfort when we're experiencing a negative emotion. But I don't necessarily categorize it. For each person, it becomes a practice of understanding themselves. So in this sort of situation, or, you know, when I notice it happens when I'm really just fatigued and tired, or it happens at this time of day, or it happens after a conversation with this person. So it really depends on the circumstances. And I think the important thing here, though, is once a person begins to understand the contexts and the sorts of situations and circumstances that it occurs for them in, is to begin to get really familiar with the fact that we're great storytellers. Our minds are great storytellers. And in the situations when we might have this experience of discomfort, the story might sound like, this shouldn't be happening. He shouldn't have looked at me that way. I should be better at handling this. We hear a lot of shoulds. It's a story about how things should be unlike they really are in reality. Like, you have a look on your face right now. My mind could be telling a story like, he thinks I'm a complete idiot. What is he saying right now? And if I were to start believing the story that my mind just conjured up, he thinks I'm an idiot, I'm going to get all flustered and not know what to say and get highly anxious right now. And
then go eat.
And then go eat! Or start crying. So...
No, it's a really good point that there are different contexts. Some of them aren't all bad.
Right.
You mentioned just celebrating around food, and I mean, eating does evoke emotion. So before I move on to that part of it, where we really get under some of the emotion, I'm kind of a theory of everything kind of guy. Like, I want to boil this down to one thing that we can both be looking at and discussing.
Yep.
So just for, I mean, I think somebody watching us speak right now, they know if they're an emotional eater, but I'm afraid a lot of people will label themselves like that unnecessarily or incorrectly, because
possibly
sometimes it's just normal because of physiology. You know, when I mentioned that when I'm very frantic, you know, adrenaline starts coursing, cortisol, you start dispensing glucose and triglycerides in your bloodstream, and so your body does start physiologically getting hungry to prepare for activity.
Absolutely.
So I know some of this is normal. Some of it could become almost, well, definitely eating disordered. And
dysfunctional. Let's call it dysfunctional.
So I guess I want to see if there's a way to pigeonhole different people's problems, perhaps. Like, I'm an emotional eater, like I said, because I'm an anxiety-based person. Somebody else may be a sad type person, or am I totally off base with how we're describing that?
No, I don't think so. I think there's tone, if we can call it something. There's an emotional tone that drives a lot of the behavior for different people. If I had to categorize myself, I eat in times of more like an amplification of emotion. Anger, distractedness. So there's that element of just, there's an elevation to it. Other people, like you said, when they're feeling discouraged or particularly shameful or sad or something didn't go the way they think that it should, again though, we're getting back to story, that's when they're going to try to assuage the emotion, distract themselves from the emotion, avoid it completely, get away from it. But I think what's underneath it, no matter what is driving it, there's a need that isn't necessarily being met. And it could be love and connection. It could be a sense of choice and autonomy. You know, we're getting into what are the basic psychological needs for all humans, or it could be a sense of competence. So a sense of effectiveness in managing whatever environment you're in. You know, the research that I did for my doctoral dissertation looked at this. These were, I was surveying and interviewing dieters. They had either lost all their weight and were maintaining, or they'd lost all their weight and had gained all of their way back. And I was looking to see at what sorts of behaviors drove them towards eating. And Joe, it ran the gamut. It could have been, you know, the dog misbehaved. It could have been, you know, I had an argument with my spouse. It could have been, you know, my boss walked by and looked at me funny. It was anything that felt threatening in some way.
And so, I mean, that's, I think you just really narrowed it down for me.
Okay.
And hopefully, you know, other people. And just that it could come from any emotion, but there is an underlying discontent. So I know I love to define happiness as the measure between expectation and outcome. And something as simple as you said, as just, you know, the remote control not working. All of a sudden you're throwing against the wall, right?
Yeah.
And that's because you have this expectation of perfection.
Yes.
And it didn't happen, so there was a wide chasm. For the person who turns to food, so this really gets to the heart of the matter, we have to first recognize, there has to be a trigger point that says, I'm about to reach for food because I'm feeling this, and we have to figure out how to bring those two levels together.
Okay, so one thing that I see among individuals who have a difficult time regulating that emotion. The remote control's not working. Now all of a sudden my heart rate is, my heart's beating out of my chest. I can feel myself getting hot and I want to throw it. They have I think I said it, they have a very difficult time in that moment recognizing what is occurring inside of their bodies. And accepting and just like, okay, I recognize this is happening. I'm acknowledging that this isn't going the way that I want it to. And what measure of influence do I have over the situation? Because they're looking at it as they have zero control. Like the remote control is in control now. This external thing, well, you know what? We live in this body. We actually have some measure of influence over how we're going to react. We can respond in, you know, just a more even keel, stable, flexible, adaptive way. Or we can get up and throw the remote, punch a hole in the wall, and go shove food in our faces. Am I on the right track here? Tell me your question again.
No, perfectly. I think you're describing a process leading to awareness, because as you're having these symptomatic responses in your body, you know, sympathetic nervous system responses of anxiety. Although I think, like I said, some people could go the other way into total melancholy. You know, you could be sad and morose. But there has to be a level of self-awareness where you say, I don't like this, and this is where this is where I'm the king.
You're not gonna go there.
Of I so hate feeling uncomfortable.
Oh man.
Emotionally, like as soon as I start feeling depressed, as in I have like nothing to do in this moment. I recognize how bad that feeling is, and I start reconstructing my environment. But that took some practice.
Wait, so can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Your external environment or your internal environment?
External.
Okay.
Okay, so you got me on that one. I know where you're gonna go. But I use the external to allow my internal environment to regulate.
I like it.
So for me, if I just feel, for example, like, gosh, my life just doesn't feel right. Like I'm just not happy in general. I start saying, okay, why? And you know, am I not working on the things I want to work on? I recently did this where I decided, you know, I've lost my vision of just creative writing. I'm so focused right here, right now on some business type things that I'm not doing what I want to do for fun.
What you're truly passionate about and what lights you up.
So I had to kind of block schedule and say, yeah, I need a new project. I need something that I'm pouring some energy into. And I do that even with just general anxiety or things like that. And I think in those acute moments where people are labeling emotional eating on emotion, we first have to say, okay, why is this causing this? Yes. So as you were saying, that awareness of the symptoms in your body.
Well, I was chuckling because literally over maybe the past couple weeks, I have felt similarly, where just this kind of lead-ish. And it's the first place I went to, but it was more internal. Like, I didn't really change my environment. I was still working in the same place. Like, there was a little less sun in San Diego, which maybe contributed to it. But it was more, what is missing? What's not right? And maybe what stories am I telling myself right now about what's not good? How should things change? Who's not giving me what I want or saying what I want to hear? Because literally when I looked at my environment, nothing was different. Everything was occurring as it had been. And so I attributed it to what are my perceptions of the situation then? And here's what I had to do. I had to talk to a friend. I'd been feeling disconnected. So it was a question of what needs do I need to take care of now? And without that question, I was going to try to go feel fulfilled doing other things, eating. I don't know. I don't know what it would have been. But getting to the true need, I even went to things like, I am working out a lot harder than I have been. I'm training a lot harder. Maybe I need more rest. Maybe I'm just more fatigued and I need more sleep. So physiologically too, we attribute a lot of things to something that's wrong with us, or we need to make sweeping changes, but it can be as little as maybe I need more sleep. Maybe it's a hormone change happening. Maybe it was what I ate yesterday. But the other thing that I will say, Joe, is that it doesn't necessarily help us to label. And I think that just by calling ourselves emotional eaters or binge eaters, even if binging is occurring and eating outside of hunger is occurring, we create an identity out of that. And then it becomes us. And then it gets a lot more difficult to get out from underneath it. Because if that is me, then I can't get away from it. Rather than looking at it as a behavior and perhaps as a habit that's just, you know, it's become very regular now because I've done it so much. It's not you. Just like the emotion isn't you. I teach my clients to rather than saying like, I am sad or I am angry, to get a little bit of distance from it, because oftentimes it can feel so suffocating. Like, I can't get away from it. It's like, it's on top of me. To get a little bit of distance from it, to say, oh, this is an experience of anger. Oh, this is an experience of sadness. And what it allows them to do then is to tune into the body rather than trying to get away from it, to just recognize what the sensations of it are. So you saw me like 5 minutes ago take a big deep breath. I do that automatically now because I've done it so often in times when I can feel that energy rising, and it's not going to help me. It's not going to be effective in the situation. But when we can take a big diaphragmatic deep breath and actually pay attention to extending the exhale, we activate the parasympathetic nervous system, which is that relaxation, rest, digest. Now I can cognitively process some things in a more linear way, be more thoughtful and reflective. Because when we're in that amplified, threat-based, this is completely uncomfortable, I need to get away from this place, we can't think straight. We can't. So that's not the best time to actually learn how to change our behavior. I mean, some people do it. It's definitely not as easy.
So I'm glad we took a turn to talk about general attitude. Yeah. Because I think a lot of people will not only gloss over this, they'll almost deny it. They won't say, I have a depressive personality, or I struggle with this. It's easy to say, no, it's that thing. It's this circumstance, or when that person does this, and then I emotionally eat. Yeah. So I would love to chat for a little time about how just to recognize that in yourself, because the way you stated it, you are not that emotion. I'm not angry, I'm feeling anger, or I feel anger in this moment. Right. It brings me to the word soma, you know, our body, because I know in terms of things like chronic pain, people have to learn to do that, to disassociate this intense raging pain I have, and just say, well, that's because this nerve is being overstimulated and my brain is interpreting it that way. And as soon as you can kind of objectify that, you can really start to reduce that perception of pain. And I think emotionally that has to be very similar.
Yes, we need that slight bit of distance from it. And, you know, in the moments where we can, instead of identifying with it, like, this is me, I am it, by changing the language a little bit, we recognize too that, because we get into this mode that it's not going to end. This is permanent. When we're feeling intense pain and intense emotion, it's like, this is going to stay here forever. But when has it? It doesn't. Even if someone suffers from chronic depression, there are nuances to that depression. There are waves. It's granular. Nothing is permanent. So, you know, sadness can be a deep, deep, deep blue, or it can be like a periwinkle blue. It can feel really, really heavy, or it can feel just like you have kind of a blanket on top of you. But the same with sadness, or happiness, for example. Like, I can feel exalted, or I can feel just like joyful. So there are layers, there are nuances, and emotions are granular, and I think we really need to understand that. We need to understand and remember that they're impermanent. And you know, I can't remember where I read this, but an emotion typically takes about 60 to 90 seconds to move through you. I thought go away, to move through you, because that's literally, emotions are energy. How do we know when we're even having one? Because the energy in our bodies shifts. Something changes in here. Otherwise, what signals us to even know that we're having an emotional experience?
So let me ask you this, because we don't always emotionally eat in a self-sabotaging way.
Yeah.
And I think we've all had the experience that we can be just doing fantastic, and for months at a time, weeks at a time, then something happens. Could be some old habits, or you know, some context.
Yeah.
But when you get derailed like that,
yeah.
for some people who consider themselves emotional eaters, which we're trying to get away from that label, but they consider that, it goes deep.
Yeah.
I've had clients who will disappear, and they are just locked in a bedroom for an entire weekend, just rolling through tens of thousands of calories, and they're covering up emotion with that, right? They're trying to avoid something.
Yeah.
And it could be so general, right? It could be a parent's expectations are not being met. It could be a spouse situation. It could be whatever. I mean, it could be just about anything.
Yes.
So
that is that unpleasant.
Right.
Yeah.
So are there, you mentioned avoidance. Are there other things that you have to watch for as a massive indicator of a habit you need to break?
Attachment to things being a certain way is a big one. An attachment to an identity. I am this. I don't do this. I do this. Oftentimes when something from the environment or a situation occurs that bumps up against what we believe ourselves to be or not be, it creates that tension. It's not comfortable. Like if you get punched in the face, like that's not comfortable. It's kind of, it shocks you. And so getting in touch with, I keep coming back to stories because we tell ourselves stories all the time. Our identities are literally stories about who we are or who we're not. And, you know, I think, Joe, as maybe weird as this is going to sound, while identity is important and understanding ourselves is important, so too is being somewhat fluid. Because life is fluid and it's always changing. And so part of this, and you already said this word, is beginning to understand what our expectations are and what our preferences are and how those are potentially causing us pain because we are so tied into them. Like if this doesn't happen and if it's not this way, then everything falls apart. Everything unravels. Yeah, I think that's one of probably the biggest things that I see is...
So hearing you say my favorite word in that context, expectations, it really triggered a thought in me in that, as you said, everything unravels. It reminds me that eating isn't the only emotionally compensatory behavior.
No.
Some people could just start slamming down a fifth of bourbon.
Absolutely.
Some people could delve into some other addictive or destructive behavior.
Oh yeah. Overworking.
Yeah.
Porn.
You're avoiding something
Yes.
by engaging in too much work.
Yes.
So there's the avoidance and attachment, you know, two different sides of that.
There's a lot of honesty that has to occur for this to change. a lot of honesty with yourself about what you are not paying attention to, what you're not allowing yourself to become aware of. And, you know, the word integrity just popped into my mind. But there's a level of integrity that we have to start having with ourselves. And that's not going to be comfortable. But once we begin to do that and we see that we can, that we have the capacity, that we can be and experience these emotions, as we're kind of, what we are literally doing is peeling back layers of conditioning about what should be and who I am and who I need to be and, you know, who I think everyone else thinks I should be. All of that stuff that has literally, since we were born, been piled on top of us, or that we've accumulated from the people in our lives, the messages that we've been sent, even just covertly. Our caregiver may have looked at us in a weird way, and we assume a message from that. I'm bad. I am worthless.
So you're talk about unlayering. You're doing that in a phenomenal way, I think, in helping people, I hope, see this as objective and something that they can actually handle. Like, when I say objective, it's tangible, it's a real thing.
We can set it right here in front of us.
Yeah, because I think so many people think, well, I'm just, like, this just happens to me.
Right.
It's a condition, it's the way my brain or my emotions work, and I can't help it. But, you know, when I said it could be any other addictive or destructive behavior, if somebody says for a second, wait a second, so this is the way I deal with this, just like so-and-so does that, and so-and-so uses this coping mechanism, then we can start seeing it as a thing that we can control instead of it controlling us.
I can influence this.
Right. And that's a big step, because even if you track back 30 or 40 minutes ago to my first questions, you would see me trying to explain this without realizing it. Like, I'm looking for a way to get out of that state of emotion. And if I just see it as something that I'm reacting to that I can change. Reacting to,
yes. And that's an important keyword, because the practice that we need to begin practicing is to respond rather than react impulsively. And, you know, when I think of the word respond, because it's going to get emotional for me, responding is, there's a tenderness about it, there's a softness about it, and that's something that I had to learn. My compensatory behavior was don't eat. Same thing. It's, I'm trying to get away from the pain. And so I'm going to control what I think I can. I controlled food in the opposite way that a lot of people who come to us with emotional eating. That's emotional eating. It really is. It's just the opposite end of the continuum, or the flip side of the emotional eating coin maybe would be better. But I had to practice acknowledging, increasing that level of awareness, and allowing myself to be with whatever was there, and to cry. Like, I've never cried more in my life than when I decided I would let myself cry and actually have and experience those emotions.
You remind me that, even though as cliche as this sounds, happiness is a choice. I recently spoke to you about some life perceptions, and I said, you know, I've for a long time been trying to organize my life in these nice little containers, and by this time I want to be doing this and this and this. And I just woke up one day and said, wait a second, am I trying to control those things and my expectations in a way that I think is very zen-ish, like I'm trying to be okay, but I think I was almost going the opposite direction, where I want to say yes to opportunities instead of saying, well, I'm categorizing things and I can move on. I want to get excited about living. I want to look at work as I get to do this.
Yes.
I want to do this. I have such an amazing opportunity to do this. And if everything is escalated to a positive level, instead of looking at the things I have to get done, deadlines, etc., I just say, let's let all that take care of itself. Same circumstances, but now I'm choosing to enjoy it. That moves the expectation and outcome to a much more synchronized level. And I think for somebody, whether it's sadness or anxiety or any other type of emotional context, if you start with that center of who you are and how you view life, like that has to eventually be where you end up, or none of this will matter. You'll just learn one behavior, one trick, one little technique. They'll all crumble at some point.
I completely agree with you. Yes, it being about you getting really, really in touch with. And this is not something that just happens overnight. You decide, I'm going to decide on what my life philosophy is. It's a life philosophy, guys. It's going to take you a lifetime to literally develop it. But taking the time to reflect on what is important to me, what do I love, how do I want to live, how do I want to be with people. Okay, I recognize these are my tendencies. I can choose differently. I get that this life is happening for me, not happening to me. These circumstances, like, I can choose right now how I'm going to perceive them as they come in and flow back out.
And we see people who are better at that, right? Like if we all stop for a second and thought, okay, who is the happiest person I know? I would bet it's somebody who is pretty outwardly gracious and feels gratitude. Like they don't feel like, oh, my needs aren't being met, or this isn't happening the way I want it to, and so they're picky and critical. Happy people just feel an intense amount of gratitude. Yeah,
appreciation, and you see them being more generous. They exhibit more compassion. Why though? Because they have learned how to give it to themselves. They have learned how to be tender and softer towards themselves. Otherwise it's very difficult to extend it to others.
And instead of expecting everything to be perfect, I'm just going to expect life to be life. I may have a good day, I may have a bad day, good minute, bad minute, but I'm going to expect that, and so I can respond in kind. I can just take it as it comes. And again, those are the people that you just don't see get just ruffled all the time, and they're not having those coping mechanisms just chewing at them all day long.
There's an intense understanding, like this, just an internal barometer with. And I wouldn't say that it necessarily comes naturally, maybe more for some people than others, but it literally is a practice because they're asking themselves these questions. And I loved when you did this because I mentioned there's a fluidity. Okay, this isn't ideal. I don't like this. I don't have to like it. I don't have to act like I like it either. But I recognize that it's not always going to be here, and I can choose in this moment how to be with it. The other thing about happiness real fast is, studies have shown that the happiest people are the ones who experience the widest expanse of emotions. They are living life literally in full color. Good, bad, ugly, awesome, amazing, and how many times have we heard stories of significant adversity, hardship, catastrophe, and these are the happiest individuals who have gone through possibly the worst things that you could think of in their lives. But what do they choose to do with it? What do they choose to do with that pain and that energy that consumed them for, I mean, however long, they use it for the benefit of other people. They use it wisely.
Yeah. You made me think of the worst phrase human beings have ever come up with, which is, everything happens for a reason. That is the dumbest thing ever spoken. Nothing could be further from the truth. And it gives us this shield to say, well, if this is bad happening, like, oh, it's for a reason. And it doesn't make us sit in that circumstance, deal with it, and think of the flip side. If I just don't think everything happens for a reason, there's some kind of agency, life is just life, it comes at us, then I can choose, like you said, to use it for a positive. I can learn from it, I can use it to help others, but it's not something that happens to us. It's just, it happens to all of us. Yeah. It's how we respond.
So what's interesting about that phrase to me, Joe, is that I think that perception of it happening for a reason is the person trying to find agency within it, because they have to make sense of it, right? Yeah.
So I remember going all the way back to my first full-time freshman year of college, and my first elective course I ever took was stress management.
I remember you saying that.
So already at 20-ish years old, I was in the military for a couple years, I was already thinking, like, why am I so anxious and whatever. And I know from those days that some kind of physical intervention was helpful to break those cycles. So something as simple as stopping and closing your eyes. I'm feeling this emotion, I'm going to go run to the pantry and eat something. Let me just stop and think, take a breath, as you just did.
Yeah.
I saw you do that on purpose. Things that they taught us were like, you know, when you're going to bed, if you're so anxious you can't sleep at night, go through that body scan, make your muscles relax. And you can be laying in bed and all of a sudden you realize, like, holy crap, I was totally...
one muscle at a time.
Right.
Yes.
So what do you use as skills? You said this is a practice. Yeah. Happy people practice being happy. How do you tell a client or a clinical patient, here's what I need you to go home and do?
Right.
Right. Let's get you on this path to understanding.
Well, so I want to hit on something that you said. You are literally putting your attention somewhere. When you do a body scan, it's like, okay, I want you to put your attention on your forehead. Relax the muscles in your forehead as you're breathing. Now I want you to move down to your chin. Relax the muscles of the chin, the jaw. Now move into the muscles of the neck. Let your throat relax. Soften the area around your neck. Now your shoulders. Literally in those moments what you are doing is you are keying in on and letting putting your attention on, very deliberately, one thing. And that's a key practice. Something that I practice in order to learn to hone that attention is meditation. And there are lots of different kinds, but meditation is literally a practice of attentional awareness. And I think for individuals who struggle with emotional eating, especially when it's an anxiety state or it's a sadness state, we can begin to feel very chaotic and diffuse and pulled in a million different directions. And that's uncomfortable. We feel like fractured. It doesn't feel stable. We don't feel grounded. So one thing that I would recommend is a meditation practice. Call it a mindfulness practice if you're uncomfortable with the term meditation. It's literally just training your attention. But once a day, start with 2 minutes and you can leave your eyes open, because the meditation that I practice, it's an awareness. It's a wakeful practice. So I leave my eyes open, and where I am putting my attention is just on the feeling of my breathing. It's the sensation of my breathing, and that may be when I'm breathing in, like the feel of the air going through my nostrils, and when I breathe out, you know, the air releasing from my nostrils. I may feel it more in my chest or my abdomen, but I am pinpointing my attention in one place. Try it for 2 minutes every day, and what you will find is that you lose that attention. As long as I've been doing this, what happens is your mind goes somewhere else. You get lost in some story about, you know, what you talked about with your husband the night before, or the trip that's coming up, or the things you need to pack, or the dinner that you need to make. And the practice is, when you notice that, you just label it as thinking. You let go, and you bring it back to your breathing. Now that's one way of practicing. Another thing that I ask my clients to do to get really familiar with how their bodies cue them in to what the experience of emotion is to just pick 2 positive emotions and pick 2 what you would call unpleasant emotions. And for each one of them, assess and identify what the signs and symptoms are. So the signs would be the things that, the indicators, the signals that are on the outside. Like, if I were anxious, you would be able to see, you can't see it, I'm like wiggling my leg, or clenching my fists, or I'm pacing a lot, or I'm talking really, 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 really fast, or like sweat's pouring down my face. These are sorts of things that other people would notice. Or maybe I say certain things, maybe I get really snappy. So it's fun to kind of, if you trust someone enough, to ask them, how do you know when I'm feeling anxious? What's really cool is you learn some things you probably didn't know. So now you're becoming more aware of what your tendencies are around things that you were not aware of before. Now the symptoms are what occurs on the inside. So I'm anxious, you can't see my thoughts, but they're all freaking jumbled up there and chaotic, and I can't make sense of anything right now. Or my heart is beating a mile a minute and I'm feeling really hot inside, or I feel like I have this just butterflies in my stomach, or my chest feels really tight. So getting very in touch with how our bodies communicate with us about what's occurring.
So what's interesting about that is you probably remember me telling you this, maybe you have seen me do this, but when I feel a threshold of anxiety get to a certain level, I will just stop what I'm doing and lay down flat on my back.
Lay on the floor.
I'll just like, you'll walk in my office and you'll think Joe just died, like he's on his back.
I love this, and I'll tell you why, but keep going.
But I know I need a brain state change.
Yeah.
And it's not going to happen for me if I'm just still in that same context, just trying to back out of it. I need to physically change what's happening in my body.
And you're changing the position of your body, which I love. People who are sad or feeling depressed or anxious, their bodies are going to register it, and typically they're not like open and expansive, you know, chest up, shoulders back.
I do another thing bodily for sadness. Which is, again, a body state change, which is a change of environment. So I know if I'm just really unhappy, and it's not just, I don't mean just acutely I'm having a depressive thought, but I mean if I just feel like something is not, I will go do something, whether it's go take a walk, do something. So again, it's me knowing that the state of mind I'm in is transitional. It's not something happening to me that I can't get out of. I can change it because, you know, I'm a naturalist, right? So I think of how am I changing my brain chemistry, oxygen, blood flow, things like that, just the parts of my brain communicating with each other. If I can stop that, retrain it on something else, I mean, if not all, almost all of whatever I was feeling comes back to center.
So you make a really good, I want to say this, when you lie flat on your back on the floor, what I think of is you're grounding yourself. It's like your body has roots now to the planet. Like, you're part of it. Because I think a lot of times when we're experiencing this just amplified emotion or heavy emotion, we feel like we don't belong. We don't belong here. We're on the outskirts and no one would understand. And when you get on the floor, it's grounding.
And then, you know, you mentioned that it is a sense of familiarity. Like I feel something against my body.
Yeah, and that's actually, you know, in some therapeutic modalities, it literally, okay, I just am concentrating on feeling my feet on the floor. This is when you start to feel just incredibly chaotic, scattered, and thoughts are everywhere, and you need to ground yourself. Feet on the floor. Or my hands are on my thighs. I'm just going to feel the weight. This is where I'm putting my attention. The weight of my hands, the heat of my hands on the tops of my thighs. Pinpointing the attention. It's a grounding exercise. But back to our original kind of point, it's I have to get in touch with what my tendencies are and begin to notice, like you do, when I start to feel like, oh, down, sad, morose, bored, really fatigued, what's going on around me and inside of me? And then make a conscious choice to shift the state. Not, I'm going to avoid this. We can avoid avoidance by acknowledging that it's there first. Okay. Breathe. I just do it. I just breathe. I'm having an experience of, okay, this is a state. A state can shift. Now, what is in my power to do next?
So, I want to tell you another thing that you made me think of that seems to work for me. I always come back to this. You and I both like doctors Julie and John Gottman.
Yes.
And I know in one of their books, he goes through this entire chapter of describing if you, in the most detail possible, can label an emotion. Research shows something like 50% of the power of the emotion, the negative power, drops down.
Yes.
So if I can just say, wow, I'm actually feeling incredibly, not just sad, but go deeper than that. What kind of sadness? Like really go deep. You know, interestingly to me is cognitively you're taking some energy from your limbic system up to your neocortex, because now your neocortex has to work to analyze that, and that just shifts the energy into a place now where you can tangibly work with it. It objectifies it again.
Yes, and there's a sense making that is occurring. And you know, lots of researchers have called it, like the phrase is name it to tame it. But what you're doing is acknowledging it by doing that. You're saying, this is an experience of, or I am feeling this sort of an emotion. And this is what it feels like. These are the sensations in my body as I'm experiencing it. And actually doing that with someone who you trust is very, very powerful, because then they can acknowledge it too. Then you're not alone, you're not the only one who's experiencing it. There's this sense of common humanity, and you're okay.
So let's do that right now
for
our audience. You said it helps to do this with somebody.
Yeah.
And I go back to one of my counselors. In different phases of my life, I've worked with therapists and psychologists and life coaches. And I always go in with a sense of, I want to learn something. It's not just, I'm a mess, fix me. It's, I view each one of those people, I seek them out for their different skills in different areas, and I want to learn something from them. And I will tell you, every time one of those counselors or coaches says, okay, here's what this is, and they have some kind of objective system. And I'm thinking of a guy I worked with in California, Dr. Sandek, I think was his name, online relationship, online counseling. And he had published a couple books, and he sent me one of his books, and just these visual graphics. So it's not just abstractly describing emotions and this kind of thing.
It's not
like
conceptual.
It's here are pictures and graphics of what we're talking about. Maybe it's just me, that's how my brain works, but I can zero in and say, wow, now I have something, a visual, physical representation in my mind of what I've been experiencing or describing or working on. It just makes it easier. Again, it brings it down to an objective level. So, if you agree that that's helpful, let's do that right now for our audience.
Okay. I don't know what we're doing, but okay, let's do it.
So, whether it's 1, 2, 3, or how many things, let's give a couple steps for our audience, because we've had a lot of good information.
Yeah.
It's been amazing for me just to hear you articulate some of these concepts in the ways you did. But what are next steps? If I say, okay, Kori, I want to be where you're describing, how do I get there? Give me the first step or two. What would you tell me to do? I've got my pen out, and I'm gonna take notes.
Yeah.
And Dr. Kori Propst is gonna tell me exactly what I need to do.
So I actually wrote a blog on this. It's called "Timeout on the Toilet."
My therapy is gonna be in the bathroom now.
Your therapy, so many good things can happen in the bathroom. And the reason that have you heard of pairing? So you're going to pair a new behavior with one that you're already engaged in on a regular basis. We all go to the bathroom, right? So that's a good place.
To text, to do email.
No, we're going to lose that bad habit, and we're going to install a new one. But, if you're going to pull out your Headspace app while you're in the bathroom, I'd say that's good.
Okay.
Use that time to practice your meditation states.
So you're pairing a new behavior with something you're already doing.
Yeah.
So what you're describing though is
this is just I'm kind of laying the groundwork.
Some type of scheduled self-reflection.
Absolutely.
Okay. So whether it's in the bathroom or on my couch or on my office floor, you would want me to do this every day or several times a day?
Every day.
I'm taking notes. I want to know exactly what to do.
Every day. Yes.
Okay.
For 5 minutes.
Okay.
That can be a little long to sit on the toilet. You don't have to sit on the toilet for that long. Do it wherever is most comfortable. And, find a quiet spot, because this is a place where you really want to get in touch with yourself. And in these 5 minutes, what you're doing, and this is why I'm recommending it, is because, like I said, in the moment where you're already in that amplified state and feeling threatened and wanting to move towards food, that's going to be the most difficult time to stop yourself. Is it possible? Yeah. Is it likely? Not as much as if you learn to recognize the symptoms that you're headed there beforehand. So that's what you're doing. In these 5 minutes, what you're going to be practicing is asking yourself, what's occurring for me right now? What emotions am I experiencing? What are the sensations in my body? Where do I feel tightness, heaviness? Where is there constriction? Because usually when people are going to engage in emotional eating, that's what's happening. There's constriction, there's tightening,
So in that moment of self-reflection, I've got my 5 minutes of Dr. Kori Probst's prescribed time.
Yeah.
is it just that general body self-awareness, or am I consciously thinking about what I'm trying to work toward? Like, okay, I'm trying to reduce sad eating or anger eating. I'm labeling it, you know, name it to tame it. And so are you bringing that in, or is this just general body awareness?
This is general body awareness.
Okay.
I would do a separate practice for the things that you're mentioning. And, you know, one thing that you could do is visualization. So I would schedule another amount of time. And like, we're sharing this with you guys in a finite amount of time. Like, if I'm working with a client, we have an ongoing relationship. So I'm talking to them regularly and understanding what they're learning. So
all this really is a process.
Yes.
It takes a lot of time.
It is. But visualization is going to be really, really effective with practice for imagining exactly how you want the situation to look. Most people will visualize just the outcome. Like, me not emotionally eating, me standing in the kitchen and not having any food around or not eating. That's not what visualization, it doesn't work like that.
So so this is a good place that I would introduce pairing. Because if I'm getting in that state to visualize and just be self-reflective, this is what good mantras are for. If I have a phrase that really encapsulates something, it brings about a positive emotion, then that can be my grounding place.
You bet.
Yeah.
Pick a word, pick a phrase. The other thing that I practiced with was, because I recognized that different environments have a different effect on me. So if I'm at work, I'm in a different state than I am when I get in my car to go home than I am when I get out of my car to go into my home. And so I practiced with each change of environment. Like, when I would get in my car at work, before turning on the engine, I would sit there and breathe for at least 1 minute. And I would say something to myself, like, I'm breathing in acceptance, I'm breathing out negativity. I mean, pick what's going to be meaningful for you, but change the state. I didn't want to bring that heightened level of amplification home. Yeah.
So I did something very similar that was very effective. And I just reminded myself that I don't even have to do it anymore. But when I was trying to deal with anxiety that was preventing me from sleeping at night, like, I could go to bed and I start thinking of something and get amped up to the point where I could physically feel an adrenaline dump in my kidneys.
Yes.
And I swear, it actually, I almost feel like I could hear it. It was like, boom. And I just knew, okay, I'm not going to sleep for the next 8 hours. Like that is now a chemical response, right? So I started a process of visualization where I would, in my brain, create a very detailed place. And I went back to one of my happiest childhood memories. And it was this place where, you know, I lived on a farm, and behind this cornfield there was this nice hill, kind of a hedgerow with trees. And I just remember one of the earliest points of self-awareness I ever had, 7, 8 years old.
I know this story.
Just laying back on the ground, looking up through the trees at the sky, and just the blue sky, the clouds, and you're about ready to cry. And that's the first time I can ever remember as a human being feeling totally and purely conscious of myself as an entity.
Yeah.
And so I recreated that in my mind as an adult, and I would go back to that place, and I would recreate it. And even as an adult, I just picture myself laying down there looking up at these trees, and
the imagery, the vividness, the colors, all of it.
Yeah, and just by creating that physical visual space in my head, I could completely eliminate those trajectories toward anxiety.
Yeah. You're changing your state by creating that new vision and imagery. Visualization, you know, if we're just looking at, if you look at your typical response for emotional eating, let's just get really practical. Maybe it happens for you when you come home from work. Maybe it happens for you during the workday, in and out of the break room. Visualizing how you want the day to look, where you're going to go, who you're going to talk to. Visualize yourself walking past the break room. Like, exactly all of the images, the colors, the voices, make it as just vibrant as you can. How it's going to go for you. That's what true visualization is about. I remember when I was younger, just kind of an offshoot, I could not for the life of me, when I was a kid in gymnastics, couldn't do a freaking back walkover. I could not do it. Every day practicing, could not do it, could not do it. I don't know who said start visualizing. I don't think anyone ever did tell me that. But I would go to bed and I would just imagine myself doing back walkovers over and over and over and over and over again. And I mean, our memories are fallible. In my mind, it's like I did that one night and then the next day I did a back walkover. But it's incredibly powerful.
So 5 minutes a day, scheduled. Can't just wait for the right time to happen. You're going to schedule this time to start checking in. And I think it should be methodical, because if we just say, okay, I'm just going to lay here for 5 minutes, like, you know, we need something. So you talked about just centering your breath. That's basic meditation. Could be creating that visual memory like I did, that's relaxing and meaningful and brings about some sense of peace. Could be the repetitive mantra type thing. A lot of people do that, or at least that starts the process. All of what we're doing is we're centering our attention. Because emotional eating is I'm diverting my attention to something else. So if we don't want to eat, what do we want to be doing? What do we want to be focusing on? That's what we're practicing in these moments. 5 minutes a day. So let's say, as part of process, I'm your patient or client, and I've been doing this successfully, and I've had a couple more sessions with you, and you're seeing some progress.
Yeah.
What would be your next step for me now to address what I would label myself as an emotional eater? I'm now centering myself. I'm creating that time, 5 minutes a day. Are there more active things you start layering in for people?
Well, I think that, you know, we talked a little bit about the external changes that you're going to make, like environmental changes, and internal changes that we're going to make. This is all real internal that we're talking about right now. Like, let's get in touch with our bodies, our emotion, you know, what are our tendencies in different situations. I think that we need support. Like, let's start getting some connection and talking with other people
about this. Your experience going through this.
Yes.
Have a friend or somebody that you're discussing.
Yeah, don't keep it to yourself. Have someone that you trust to talk to about it and to discuss the experience with. In situations like this, like I said, we feel like we're alone in it a lot of times. Like, we're on the outskirts. No one else would understand. This is a struggle that's only mine. And it's never like that. There is a sense of calm and humanity, but we'll never know it unless we get within a community of people, or even just one person to share it with. And then it's not a secret anymore, because secrets fester and they get harder and harder to get away from the more you keep them in the dark.
How do you feel about active information pursuit? So do you ever tell a client, you know, okay, we've been working together for a while, or maybe even the first time, like, go read this book, this is really important, or watch this video? What would be a good baseline information point that would recommend something to me for information?
Go watch my YouTube video
on which one?
Called Binge Eating and Your Basic Needs.
Okay.
That would be a really good place to start.
Okay.
One book that I have the majority of my clients read who have struggled with binge or emotional eating is Eating in the Light of the Moon. I can't even remember the author. It changed my world when I read it. for the first time. And it really puts into perspective just, I think, who we are as humans in this world, and that what we experience is normal, and so that we don't have to try to get away from
right.
this.
And that's kind of full circle what we started discussing. It's just life is going to come at us, and we just learn to lower our expectations from perfection, and I don't have to feel pain or discomfort. Expect that you will feel those things.
It's going to happen.
And learn to say, hey, how can I use this to benefit me? How can I use this to craft something
right
better?
Here is an opportunity. That's a perception. That's the perception that we need to begin practicing. This right here, this, whatever this is that I'm labeling as uncomfortable, is an opportunity to learn about myself, to learn about the situation, to learn about how I want to respond and be a different person, or be this person as best I can be in this moment.
End it, Kori.